All right, everyone. Well, I think we got the first wave of people out of the waiting room. People will continue to join us for the next little bit, but I think we have a jam-packed agenda today, so I'll go ahead and get us started while Kelly continues to let people in. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, likely over your lunch. So I hope you're finding the time to snack on whatever you have for lunch today as we listen to this great session. But this is session two of the Dynamics of Donor Development series, and we are really happy that you've been able to join us today. So just a few logistics, and then we're going to get into a quick announcement, and then we'll turn it over to Vickie and Brad again for some great content. But as a reminder, this session, or this series rather, launched last week with a session on creating a culture of philanthropy. A recording to that went out to all who registered. If you didn't register, you can still access that recording through the Sunflower Foundation website. We have a page for the series that will host the resources and recordings, kind of a one-stop shop. Kelly, if you could drop that link in the chat here whenever you have a minute, that would be super helpful. In just a little bit, the topic that we'll be covering today is crafting your case for support. And then over the next few sessions between now and April 28th, we'll be covering the topics that you see on the screen here. So on March 24th, we'll be talking about donor advised funds. April 21st, we'll be talking about discovery conversations and corporate development. And then we'll wrap up the series on April 28th with a session on prospect research for small shops. So we hope that you will be able to continue to join us for this series. You will need to register for each one that you're interested to attend. You can do all of that on our webpage that Kelly is putting in the chat. So we're expecting a full house again today. So if you could navigate your way to the chat and introduce yourself, that would be a great way for you to participate in the webinar over the next hour or so. On your screen, there should be a toolbar on the bottom, a black toolbar. There's a thought bubble with the word chat somewhere in the middle. If you click that, you'll get the chat window. And if you want to add your name, your organization, and where you're joining from in the chat, that will help us get a sense of who's in the room. And that's where you can place questions and comments that you have throughout today's presentation. If you're feeling chatty, something we were talking about as we were letting people in from the waiting room, it feels like it's officially spring in Kansas. I was telling them here in Northeast Kansas, we had our first tornado warning of the year over the weekend. So if you'd like, in the chat, feel free to also add your favorite thing about spring in Kansas. I see a lot of messages popping up there, so it seems like everyone is finding it. But again, put questions there throughout today's session. We should have plenty of time to get to those at the end, and we'll keep an eye on them throughout so we can continue that conversation. With that, I'm going to turn it over briefly to my colleague Kelly Mark for a really exciting sneak peek announcement.
Thanks so much, Carly. Well, we are thrilled to be able to offer this virtual learning series. I'm very thankful to Vickie and Brad for being with us and allowing us to do this. But to help you guys turn this learning opportunity into action, Sunflower Foundation is going to be offering donor development accelerator grants for organizations that register and attend or watch the recordings of one of these 5 sessions we're offering. So we know that donor development is really essential to your long-term sustainability, but many of you guys lack those flexible resources to really dig into new strategies, to test tools, or to dedicate staff time to strengthening this work. So these accelerator grants are designed to bridge that gap, providing small catalytic funds to help organizations like yourselves apply what you learn in these series. So to be eligible to apply for these grants, you must register for and attend or watch the recording at least one of these virtual sessions. Also, as a foundation, we can grant to 501c3 organizations that have a subclassification of 509A1 or 2. And our mission is to serve as a catalyst to improve the health of all Kansans. So organizations have to align with that, improving the health aspect, but we define health in a very, very broad way. So if you have any questions about whether you're eligible to apply, feel free to reach out to us, put questions in the chat. We'll get back with you. So as you can see here, those awards are going to be up to $5,000 per organization. We are officially going to open the applications on March the 24th in our online grants management system, Flux. That application period will close up on May the 5th. We're going to continue to give you guys reminders on these sessions. We'll give you a little preview of Flux and show you how to find those applications in a later session. Next slide, Carly. So quickly, we just wanted to go over a couple of things these funds are intended for or not intended for. So you can see here, really, they're for putting to use things that you learn in this series. So really testing out new strategies that you learn about, things like piloting new donor engagement or stewardship approaches, developing donor communications tool, testing data-informed donor outreach strategies. Anything you learn over these 5 sessions that you're like, man, we want to test that out, is an eligible expense. Some things that the funds are not intended for. So these are not intended to be general operating funds or routine organizational costs. You can't use them for a contribution to a capital campaign. You can't use them to directly host a fundraising gala. Really, they are intended to give you the brain space to analyze what you've learned in this series, to allow you the space to try some of these things out and really build up those donor development muscles. So I am now going to turn it over to Candace Malone from Kansas Health Foundation, and she's going to talk a little bit about a grant opportunity that they have as well.
Yes, hello everybody. Kenneth Malone with the Community Impact Team over here at the Kansas Health Foundation, and just here to share a little bit of information about the Kansas Innovation Fund that I help manage. So what is the Kansas Innovation Fund? It's a responsive opportunity. There's one of our smaller grant opportunities, but it's open all year round, and it's like I said, it's meant to be responsive. It's meant to be really user friendly. It's geared towards our grassroots organizations. There are many, like I said, there are many grants up to $5,000. It supports new community driven ideas. It focus on improving health and health equity in Kansas. And so again, like Kelly's point, when we consider health, we consider all social determinants of health. So workforce, economic, education, literacy, mental health, all the aspects of health that contribute to a person's success at life. And it also encourages organizations to test innovative solutions. So that is one of like the biggest aspects of the criteria of the Innovation Fund, is that it has to be a new project or idea. And it's also something that we did add along the lines to some of the criteria. Well, it's not a criteria, but it's something that we did add. It was a priority for some of our grant recipients is if it aligns with our upward mobility, which is our current issue that the foundation is working on. And when we talk about upward mobility, we define it as the ability to stabilize, thrive, and make choices over time without losing connection to culture, community, or self. So, addressing somebody's lack of access to affordable housing shouldn't be moving them out of the community that they've been living in for the past 30 years. So looking at it like that, but just potentially just any ideas that help contribute to a person's thriving and so living a healthier and successful life. And talking about eligibility, we're able to issue grants to nonprofits with 501c3 status, government entities, and churches. Again, just want to emphasize it is for new projects. There's only 3 criteria for this grant, that one being that it has to be a new project or idea. So that's kind of why we thought that it could also be a good idea for this specific opportunity, because just like the accelerator grant, this is also meant to kind of seed ideas or pilot ideas, give you a chance to experiment, be innovative, give you the opportunity opportunity to develop an idea and see if it's something a possible solution. And it is one, you can only be granted one grant per year per organization. But again, applications are reviewed monthly, decisions are within 12 weeks, and a award letter allows projects to start quickly. So like I said, it's meant to be really user-friendly, doesn't take a long time to fill it out. Those three criteria, the one being it's new, are you benefiting a Kansas community? And three, are you improving the health of the audience? So just three simple criteria.
All right. Thank you so much, Candace. I'm going to stop the share here to queue up Vickie and Brad to share their slides, but just wanted to add, we'll continue to talk about these funding opportunities throughout the series, so more information to come for sure. But if you have questions in the near term, drop those in the chat or shoot Kelly or I an email, and we'll do our best to get back to you as soon as we're able. But with that, we're going to jump into today's conversation around crafting your case for support. Vickie? And Vickie, you're muted right now.
Yes, thank you for that.
There you go.
Can you see my slides?
They look great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for your time today and for joining us. If you were here last time, welcome back. If this is your first time joining this series, we're so glad that you're here. My name is Vickie Mathews. I am joined by my partner in all things good, Brad Cecil. We are with Brad Cecil and Associates, and we're here today to talk to you about crafting your case for support. The case for support is an essential and incredibly important document for any nonprofit organization. It is the way that you explain why your organization exists, what is the need that you are trying to address, what kind of impact do you create, and why is support needed now? At BCA, we like to say that our job is to inspire people to action to change the world. If you have a well-written case for support that includes all of the components that we're going to talk to today, when you're talking with a donor that is aligned with your mission, you will be able to inspire them to change the world by the work that you're doing. Now, last week, when we talked, when we started off this series, we started with building a culture of philanthropy and why that is important for you to invest time and resources so that everyone together is working to support the development process and is also aligned with the same values and messaging across the organization. The case for support is that messaging. That is the document that aligns everyone and gives you all consistent messaging to apply to different audiences and through different channels. And we're going to dig into all of that today. So let's just get started with what is a case for support. A case for support is the source of truth that aligns internal stakeholders around consistent messaging. It's the core message that can be broken down into smaller components for different audiences and channels. So a lot of you might be familiar with people asking, what's your elevator pitch? That is all encapsulated in your case for support. Today, during our time together, we are going to help you understand how to craft that bigger, broader message with all of the components that you might need to support different messages for different audiences. And then how do you boil it down into smaller and smaller and smaller bits? Now, a well-written case for support answers very specific questions, such as, what is the problem or the need that you're addressing? Why is your organization the right one to address the problem? What is your solution? What impact will your solution create? And how will it change your community? How much will it cost? And what are your funding needs? Now, this is not just a random list of questions. This is already, I'm giving you insight into the framework for how we structure and organize a case for support. These are strategically ordered questions. So you start with, what is the need? Why are you the right? You follow all of these questions. Why are you the right organization to address it? What is the impact? What will it cost? You're trying to create a narrative. It's a story that you're going to take your donors along to start from point A to point B. No one is going to start with, we're building a building and it's going to cost $10 million. That's not where you start a conversation. You have to build up to that. And if you've done it well and created the narrative on the front end and done all of the heavy lifting, anytime you need to drill down into a smaller and smaller and smaller message, the framework is already built for you, and you can pick and choose what parts of that narrative you want to bring in for the various audiences that you're talking to. Now, a case for support can also be used in any setting. So, as an example, I work in a major gift space every day. I focus on capital campaigns, strategic and comprehensive campaigns, planned giving and endowment. A case for support is the very first thing that I work on with any of my clients. It's where you can start to kind of outline what is your big, hairy, audacious goal, so that when a donor asks you, well, how are you going to do that? You have the answer. But a case for support also has an application in your annual fundraising plan. That's why Brad and I wanted to talk about this today, early on in this series, because it doesn't matter what your focus is from an organizational or a fundraising standpoint. A case for support is an essential tool to keep everyone organized and to make sure that you are considering what kind of communication you want to have with your donors, and make sure that you're building trust with them to show that your plan is well thought out. There are a few key principles for writing a case for support that we follow here at BCA. First and foremost, a case for support is not a standalone document that is intended to be shared externally. It's not a proposal template. It is your source of truth. It is where you are all speaking from, and it should be a place where you can go to get most of the answers to your questions. A well-written case answers donor questions before they are asked. This is incredibly important. We're all looking for ways that we can build efficiencies in our day. And what we have found in doing this for many, many years across dozens of organizations, capital and planned giving and comprehensive projects, when a case for support is written well, it makes the grant writing process so easy, because we've anticipated the questions that donors are going to ask, and we already have an answer that's been reviewed by all of the stakeholders that need to have input in it. It's also helpful as you're preparing to go into donor meetings. This is the framework for your talking points, and you can just boil everything down to a talking point if you have a well-written case for support. It is also used as core messaging that you can apply to other channels. I already mentioned this a couple of times, and Brad is going to dig into all of that. But again, this is where you want to start. Because of that, we recommend that you desktop publish your case for support so that you can keep it relevant at any point in time. During campaigns, I usually update a case for support maybe twice a year. An annual case for support might need to be updated maybe once a month or once a quarter. So we're going to show you what an application might be in one of the handouts of a designed, beautiful case for support, but we're talking about two different documents. Now, to give you an idea of what you can expect to get out of this session today, we're going to take you through the process of creating a case for support. But the introduction is the last thing I always write for every case for support that I've developed. I do that because I want to do all of the heavy lifting to have the rationale and the data and the call to action already written out for my project. And then I come back to the introduction and I can pull out one sentence summaries of each main section of my case for support. I've included a sample here. Now, this is not a fill-in organization name here. This is not textbook by any means. This is an actual campaign that we are managing right now for the Kansas Food Bank. So this is something that is being used every day for donor conversations for this particular project. So I'm going to go through it really quick and kind of call out a couple of things. And my hope is by the end of this session that you feel confident that you know what you're working towards. So this says, for 40 years, the Kansas Food Bank has been dedicated to providing comprehensive and compassionate hunger care whenever and wherever it's needed. That's their mission statement. It's as simple as that. Every day, KFB collects, sorts, and distributes food to a vast network of more than 700 partner agencies where the community members can receive food and services. The Kansas Food Bank serves as one of the largest geographic service areas of any food bank in the Feeding America network through its main distribution center in Wichita and a warehouse in Independence, both on the eastern side of the state. KFB has identified an opportunity to better serve the increase in need experienced by food insecure neighbors in the western, more rural communities of Kansas. This strategy centers around a transformative $10 million Building a Healthier Tomorrow capital campaign. In a dedicated effort to address the pressing challenges of food insecurity in Western Kansas, resources needed by regional partner agency, in a dedicated effort to address the pressing challenges of food insecurity in Western Kansas, the campaign will focus on the establishment of a new Western Kansas hub and providing resources needed by regional partner agencies to increase their capacity to distribute healthy food. There is no way I could have started from that place, but once I had my case for support written, I was able to pull this out. And this is an example of one of the smaller components that you can extract from your case for support. This is an email introduction. This is the basis for talking points for a phone call to introduce a project. So you can already see how you can start to drill down from a larger message down to smaller components. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Brad to talk to you about all of the best practices and techniques for how we write a case for support. Brad has founded our agency 30 years ago and has focused on creating narratives and telling stories in a way that inspires people to action to change the world. So he is a tremendous resource for you to hear all of these techniques and strategies and how to implement them. So Brad, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, well, thank you very much. And I am very excited about this because this really is the real meat of our work. We have to really pay attention to how we're putting our case for support together. When I first got into this work, let me see if I can advance things here. Vickie, can you advance that slide for me? Thanks. When I first started working in nonprofit work, one of the things I learned early on was from my bosses and the seniors in our company, our organization, was all you need to know is your numbers and your needs. And so you say, what does that mean exactly? They say, well, just tell people how many people you serve and then tell them how much money you need at the end of the year. Well, as you know, numbers and needs don't really motivate people at all. What motivates people are these narratives. And so it's really understanding your why. Why do you exist? What do you hope to do with that? And so creating a narrative is really what this is all about. The issue here is not to start with a narrative, though, but understand your mission and what you're trying to accomplish and build this case for support. You have to make a real clear argument about why a donor should even support your work. Donors don't automatically understand what this is about. It's our job to explain it to them through this process. And that's why it's really urgent and it's so important to understand that you are the one responsible to develop that case for support. And in addition, make sure it's up to date. I noticed the list of people that are here in this session today. Many of you are in healthcare. Some of you are in services to the people who are unhoused in your community. Some are providing support in the natural environment. All of these things are really crucial to understand what is it that a donor actually accomplishes when they support our work, and then how do we build that case for support from that? And then, as Vickie described to you, the clear way to describe it. So you start with your story first, and then it gets into the impact on your clients. You have to really collaborate across all your teams for this information, though. This really will strengthen your case if you know what's going on in your organization at all levels. Now, that's not easy, and sometimes makes you uncomfortable because you just want them to tell you and put this in an email to you about what they do. But it's really important for you to understand what that is so that you can communicate this to your donors, or the people who support your work. Again, as we talked about last week in really building a culture of philanthropy, this is all about people. We're really talking about how to communicate to people that makes sense to them. A lot of times we have insiders speak. For example, for years, I was the director of a shelter for runaway and homeless youth in Dallas. And we had these organizations that we were a part of. And so we used to use those acronyms all the time. So we talk about TNOYS, the Texas Network of Youth Services. We talk about the YMCA, Young Men's Christian Association. All these acronyms that we use, we just throw them around right and left as if everybody understands what they mean. Well, they really don't. That's why you need to know your audience. And you need to talk to them as if they don't always understand the acronyms that you use inside your organization. So know your audience and write with them in mind. For example, another one that I really think about a lot because of our work with hunger relief in particular. When I started working with the food banks, they used to talk to everybody about the pounds of food that they would distribute. But I found out from the donors, they don't understand what a pound of food even does. How many meals does that provide? How many people you're feeding with a pound of food? So we really worked hard to, with all of our clients, to really reframe that language so that the donors can understand it. And we put it in a way so that they could. We put it into the language of meals. This is how many meals we can provide with this. And so, again, it needs a lot of feedback, and you want to seek your feedback from those in your organizations first and those around you to see if it makes sense when you, again, write your case for support and then start segmenting it into these messages for the different audiences that you might have. Keep it updated. Again, this is super important in this world because things are changing so fast that we have to keep it updated. For example, when I was working with homeless children in the early 90s, if you ran away from home, and I want you to think about this for a second, you ran away from home, you were breaking the law. And so the rule was, according to most communities, was we got to put them in jail. So we would take kids running away from home and put them in jail. And that's where these programs started to develop across the country. So you can't put those kids in jail. They're not breaking the law. They're just trying to escape a very difficult situation. And we got to reconnect them with their parents. And so in those days, they would run away. They'd go to the big cities. They'd go to, like in Kansas, they'd go to Kansas City or Wichita or Topeka. In Texas, they would come to Dallas or Houston. But a lot of kids ran away to New York and Los Angeles and places like that. So there's a lot of things that were going on. Today, it's a very different world because of the internet and the advent of people's technology and the use of the phone. Now, a lot of kids just couch surf and they go from home to home until they run out of resources there. And then they end up on the streets somewhere and they end up in a shelter. Some of you in this group I know are working with that type of clientele. But this is why it's really important to keep things updated so that we have a case for support that's relevant and people understand how it's helping out their community. Let me see if I can go to the next slide. If you would advance that, appreciate it. Thanks. Consider the voice and tone of your organization. This is really important. How we describe what we do is so crucial to the people who support our work. And this is not just semantics. This is a matter of making sure that you think through this process. When we start talking and using voices in our language, we try to listen very carefully to what's going on with that organization. For example, the people that they serve are not problems. And so we don't want to describe them as problems. We don't ever want to communicate that the people that we're helping are problematic to all of us in this organization, and then we're here to save them. The terms that are being used, I don't want to get into too much of this detail right now, are asset framing versus deficit framing of your language. I would implore you to look into that. What does that mean, asset framing versus deficit framing? So you can describe a person and only focus on their deficits, what they don't have, what they need, what's their problem, what's bad about the situation. Or you can look at their assets. What do they have that's great? What do they have that's hopeful? What do they have that's meaningful for their future? All of those things can help you reframe a message in a way that puts the people that you're serving in the right perspective. Again, some problems that people face are very, very difficult. So we want to belittle those problems. But one of the techniques that's been used in fundraising has been an overemphasis on deficit framing. And then also there's a discussion right now going on about donor-centric and community-centric language. And in some ways, it makes the donor a necessary evil. And donors aren't necessary evil people. They are wonderful people who want to join you in this solution. And so it's part of our job to frame our language properly. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we could get into this. We have studied this for years, and it's really meaningful for all of us in our team at BCA to make sure that we're using the right language when we're describing what's going on. Again, keep your components simple: your need, your mission, your solution, and your impact. What does a dollar do in your organization? That's what I want you to think about. Down below, I put that: provide an offer structure or a value proposition. What can you do with $1? What can you do with $25? What can you do with $50 or $100? I want you to think about that for your organization, because it's really important when you're communicating to your donors or prospective donors what will happen if they join your work. Don't trust AI for all of this, because AI can really lead you astray. It can help. I don't want to belittle that. It can help a lot as you're forming your case for support. But as you know, AI is really not a smart tool. It is a dumb tool that needs to be prompted properly. So it's great when you use the tool, but you have to prompt it properly to make sure you get the results that you need. So don't think of AI as an easy solution. I submitted to ChatGPT, and this is what it kicked out. Really work with your own skill set to frame your case for support and develop your offer structures and your value propositions before you go to AI. And you can use AI as a way to refine it, but don't let it really be used to develop it for you, if that makes sense. And then we will have a handout for all of you for a template for you to develop this case for support with question prompts too. And I hope that makes sense about AI, because AI is really, really an interesting tool right now, because of the fact it's so powerful and so good that a lot of people are using it to just save time. And that's okay, but be very, very careful that if you turn it over to them, it could get you way off base real early. I like it, and I like to use it. I don't like to use it for storytelling in particular, even though it can help us summarize and synthesize our language in remarkable ways. So we use it that way. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Vickie. Oh, nope, I'm not. I'm going to stay on this. This is storytelling. Storytelling is an important part. Sorry for that jump, Vickie. Sorry for that scare. Storytelling is really about putting a narrative together for your outcomes. So I mentioned early on that I was told just talk about numbers and needs. But I learned over time, you don't want to do that. You want to talk about narratives. It's not numbers and needs, it's narratives. It's telling people's stories that have been changed by your work. And so I learned this the hard way. When I was first starting out to raise money for these homeless children that I was working with, I used to go into these meetings and I would say, we serve 500 kids a year. We provide X number of hours of counseling. We've connected this many kids back with their parents. We've helped these children transition into foster living, all of those type of things. It would bore people to death. So I would put those things together. And oh, by the way, I need $500,000 to do so. I would do it in that way. And you learn as a person who is raising funds that you do have to talk about dollars to make sure that you're communicating to people we need your support. But one day what happened to me was I got a call. It was local. Somebody said, hey, listen, I've got a family of 4. Can you take them in? They're really scared they're going to be split up. And they're all from teenage down to elementary school children. And I said, yeah, that's what we do. Sure, we can take them in. So we went through the intake process and all this. And I looked at this little girl. I'm not going to go into all the details of this, but I looked at the little girl who was the oldest in the family. And I said to her, young lady, how did you feed your family? And she started to cry. Sorry, it always gets me choked up even when I tell the story. But when she started to cry, she said, we had to steal from the store. We didn't know what else to do. And I heard the story. And from that moment, I went right down to this fundraising meeting. And again, I'm getting ready to ask for $500,000. But I started the meeting by saying, listen, I got to tell you something. This just happened to me. I told that same story in that meeting. It was in a dry eye in the place. And when I got done, I saw the people start writing checks. And I was like, wait, I haven't even asked for anything yet. What's going on here? And it dawned on me that this is what people are looking for. They're wanting to be inspired. They want their hearts stirred. Their emotions drive them to do something that is transformative. They're looking for these things. And this is why, if you look at St. Jude, for example, you realize what they've done, right? St. Jude has turned the art of storytelling into a real art form. All of their stories, the wonderful hospital there in Memphis has made a living out of really telling these transformative stories of these children that they're helping. Now, they're very dramatic. I understand that. And not all of our work is that dramatic. It's really not. But you still have to think about what is it that moves the needle and stirs the heart of the donor. And this is why it's really important to find these stories in your midst. So again, I want to encourage you to spend some time studying these stories that you have around you. They're all around you. And start really moving the needle with it, especially those in the healthcare field. Healthcare, as you know, is really dramatic right now because of some of the changes that are occurring are so dramatic and so transformative that it's almost remarkable to see what's happening. But again, it's our job to frame that in a way that the donor understands what's going on and then how they can be a part of that. Go to the next slide. Here's some examples. Again, these are just examples that we have extracted from some of our clients. After graduating high school with an individualized education program, Natasha pursued independence until her world was rocked by the passing of her mother and brother. Her grief made it difficult to find a path forward. In 2015, Natasha joined the Goodwill Empowerment Work Program, which helps adults with IDDs design their future with tailored job training and community support. Now she is thriving personally and professionally. And she said, in her words, "I'm proud of myself because I've come a long way. Goodwill gave me a lot of training and support. They helped me grow stronger, and now I love the woman I am." I love that story too, because you all know what this is about. This is about, it's about contrast. We're trying to look at what would happen if I were in that situation, and how would I respond if I were there? And I'm comparing myself to this individual. That's easy for us to do. The numbers and things like that, they don't give us that same comparison, but narratives do. Narratives provide this comparison for us to say, how would I handle this? All right. This next one, sorry for not being able to pronounce this correctly, but she'll forgive me. Verenthia, 58, makes it a priority to create balanced meals at home for her husband, Leon, and their 3 kids, JT and Natalie, who are young adults, and Princeton, who is 8 years old. While Princeton is growing and thriving, the family's older children are working hard to build their futures. Natalie is close to finishing her nursing degree, and JT is a truck driver, saving up to move into his own place. Leanne works full-time to support the family, but due to mobility challenges, Verenthia is unable to work. Despite everyone contributing what they can, it's still a struggle to afford the nutritious food that 4 adults and 1 growing child need, especially with rising costs of living. Now, you can help. Please join our incredible matching challenge to share nourishing food for more families like Verenthia's. So here is a sample of how your storytelling can impact and motivate people to action. And this is what all of us have to do. It takes a little bit of work to go through these stories and extract the ones that are real and tell them. I would implore you not to use AI to create them fictitiously, but do the real hard work of going out and interviewing people. In addition, I want to strongly encourage you, when you do this, get a case or a release form signed, get a document that lets them know where these stories are going to be told and how they're going to be told, and then do so in a respectful manner so that you know the outcomes that are coming if donors join this effort. Let me go to the next slide. Now, the other thing is, keep in mind, what forms are you using to tell your stories? Your case is the core message. Channels are different, ways to package and deliver it. And we talk about this in our business as an omni-channel approach. When we gather stories, we know we're going to tell them in a form, a different form, everywhere we tell them. So we want our case for support. These are common. Like I said, we want a one-pager or a leave behind that we create. I love the leave behind, and you'll see some samples of that in this presentation today. A slide deck, use your PowerPoint to put it together so that if you have the opportunity to present a slide presentation, you can do so. We use a lot of executive summaries and grant proposals when we talk to major donors, because major donors we treat a little bit different in this response, because we've already talked to the major donors in advance before we submit something to them. So we give them proposals. We look at our form for the website. We try to summarize all of this, and then we also look at social media and how to apply it there. Let me give you some samples of what some of these things will look like for you. I would strongly encourage you to think about getting some design together. Maybe get a freelance designer if you don't have one on your team, or if you can do this, it's great. But you really want to put together a one-page template, just a leave behind that tells your case for support, tells about the outcomes, some of the things that are going on in your organization, and how they can participate and help you. So an infographic is a great way to do that right now. In fact, we like the infographic in our agency a lot, because it simplifies the person who's trying to understand what is happening. And so this one we put together for one of our clients. It does talk about the need. In this particular case, we were working on a capital campaign, but we also want to talk about the outcomes that are being realized by this organization called MetroCrest Services here in Dallas, Fort Worth. The next slide show you is some of the other examples that we do commonly around here. This is from Harvesters, which is in Kansas City. It's the food bank network in Kansas City. And so this is an example of a letter that we put together. We always start our letter with the process of telling a story first, going into a narrative. We then go to the offer structure. We then talk about the outcomes to be realized. We go back to the story, et cetera. So we follow a format that we know is going to keep people engaged with the story and the outcomes and what they can do about it. So it's really important to follow those formats when you're writing a letter. But all of you have your own style when you write, and sometimes those styles can differ, and that's fine. I had a client for years. They wanted to write a 4-page letter in handwriting when they wrote their letters to their supporters, and that's what they did every month. And it was fantastic. It was so personal and so warm and always timely that we could never top it. We always could test against it, but we could never top it just because that was their style. That's what they developed over the years, and it worked for them really well. But keep in mind, too, you're going to use that letter, though, as just a form for mail, but we also have email. So I want to show you the next ones, too. You can put this into a different format and keep it shorter, but then make it so that it really motivates people to action online. So if you're doing it through the mail, you're going to do it offline. If you're doing it through the mail or email, excuse me, it's going to be online. So you want to make sure that all of your links and your buttons and everything that you're creating are taking them back to an action step. And we do call it a call to action in our business. So you want to make sure that when you tell the stories and put it in this format, you have a clear call to action and a value proposition or an offer structure. We also want to take a look at social media too. So social media is going to be a big tool in today's world. And some of you are really, really good with your motion graphics and your videos. Videos are not hard to capture anymore, especially with our phones. A lot of you have some really, really powerful videos that you've created, and you should be thinking about how you're going to use those. We like to use those in social media a lot because it engages the person who's reading it, engages the person who's looking for some solutions that you're offering. And so social media is one of those places that I would strongly encourage you to think about video and using those techniques. But again, use a lot of graphics in all of these, especially on social media nowadays. I'm going to turn the key takeaways then back over to Vickie so she can start talking through these.
Yes. So as we're coming close to the end of our time, and we have plenty of time for questions after you've heard everything that we've shared, the one thing that I would emphasize to everyone who's joining today is to review our template for a case for support. In that document, we have outlined each of the main sections for the case for support and questions to get you started. Now, admittedly, those questions are very general because I was trying to give something that all of you can use. You will go through a different line of questioning if you are working for a healthcare organization or hunger relief or homeless services or fill in the blank. But that should give you a good place to start to navigate through what are the questions that you should start thinking about to fill in the components of each of those sections of your case for support. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the case for support is the foundation for all of the messaging across your entire organization. Today, we spent a lot of time talking about stories because that's how you make that human connection. That's how you inspire someone to action. Stories help to reinforce an emotional connection to your mission. Gathering stories is an art. It's something that we invest time in every single day here because it's just that important. Now, consistently applying messages across multiple channels is important in that culture of philanthropy. And how are you messaging consistently to the community that you're trying to engage in your work? It should become the shared language across all of your departments, all of the levels of leadership. If you reinforce that over and over again, it becomes secondhand for everyone to understand what is the elevator pitch? What is the one sentence hook? What is that one paragraph summary that I know I can rely on when I'm reaching out to get a meeting or to ask for someone's advice? So those are the main takeaways from our presentation today. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions that we might be able to answer or clarity that we can provide around our topic for today.
Yeah, thank you, Vickie. Thank you, Brad. And as a reminder, everyone, as you have those questions, please drop them in the chat. Our scheduled time is till about 1:15 today, so we have lots of time remaining to get into the weeds and address any points of confusion that you might have or further questions. Our first one, though, is from Susan. Susan says, "Is it important to keep the need outward focused? Like we need to expand because we do not have enough room to fulfill our mission? Instead, should it be to provide dedicated educational space for youth?"
Yeah, I would keep it focused on the youth, or on your client, whoever you're serving in that regard. It is really, really important, because space by itself doesn't mean anything to people. It's just a tool that we use um, to accomplish our mission. So I would keep it focused on the outcomes that are going to be realized there.
And I'll just add that you cannot deny that you need more space to do your work. But what Brad is describing is that community-centric focus that we're talking about. So yes, we might need more office space. We might need trucks. We might need racking. We might need, computers. But what is the community impact for that? What does it mean for the individuals that are served by your organization? That's the lens that you're looking to focus on in your case for support.
Thank you. This might be things that other people know, but a point of clarification I had, you guys talked about donor-centric language and community-centric language, and I wondered if you could maybe give I just wasn't quite sure what you meant by that language, and so if there was an example or a definition to help us understand what might be more effective framing there.
Yeah, if I can speak to that, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it's very nuanced, but it's happening in philanthropy right now. There's been a little bit of a pushback on donors, because we've made it too donor centric, is what the argument is, and it's too focused on the donors and who they are rather than the outcomes that are going to be realized. So in our work, we have this formula that says if you're really talking about a donor, you want to make them the hero of the story. And the community-centric pushback is that you don't want to make them the hero at all. You want the client or the person you're serving to be the hero of the story. So in some ways, it's become very detrimental to relationships with donors. And I understand the push on the community-centric side, but I do caution people to not look at donors as people who are necessary evil. We don't want to treat them like they're an ATM. We don't want to treat them as if they're just a bank account. People are really wanting to be engaged with our work. And the way they can do so is with their donation. And so in the donor-centric model, I I do understand the dilemma of making them the hero of the story, but at the same time, we can't turn them into the evil of the story.
Sure. That makes sense. So maintaining a sense of like valued relationship with both the donor and community in how you express your language, maybe.
Yeah, it's really community-centric language has become very popular. It's a lot of people are going to be reading about it, talking about it, especially in fundraising in particular. But some of the tenets that are being promoted are things that I'm very cautious of myself after doing this work. And the reason for that is because well, Vickie and I both have the privilege of meeting face to face with these donors in many of the cases, and you won't find this selfish individual who cares about themselves, and the only reason why they're doing this is to promote their brand. You every once in a while you'll meet that person. For the most part, the people that we deal with though love the people that they're helping out, and they want to be a part of the story. They're not looking to be the hero per se, even though some of their actions are very heroic what they're doing.
Next question in the chat is from Michaela. She says, you said the case for support should be the same across the organization, but when we have a capital campaign for expansion to a second location, we still need funding for our original location. Should we have two case statements?
Great question.
Absolutely.
We deal with that all the time. And go ahead, Vickie.
Well, yes, I mean, you absolutely do need two case statements because one of the things that Brad and I and our entire team say constantly is we recognize that nonprofit teams who are taking on a major campaign, like a capital campaign or planned giving campaign, you have annual goals that you still need to meet. So if you have the pleasure of having a case statement that supports annual fundraising, you should keep that in place and develop a second case for support that outlines your big, hairy, audacious goal. That is something that we work on constantly. Now, we work very hard to understand the tone and the voice of our clients' organizations because we need to understand how you're talking about yourself on an everyday basis. And that needs to be applied to your capital or other type of campaigns case for support. And sometimes they have a reason to reference each other. So when you look at the question prompts for a case for support, we will suggest that maybe you need to think about what does long-term sustainability look like. That's going to reference back to what your annual fundraising plan is. It's going to reference any investments that you're making in your development team. It could also reference what you're doing from a strategic planning standpoint. And if you have a strategic plan in place, that structure and framework should be referenced in both of these case for supports. And you'll have some donors who are only interested in funding programs or the day-to-day work of your organization. You'll have some that love the idea of helping to create a new home, a second location, a renovated facility, something like that. And having those two different messages will benefit you in the long run.
Next question is coming from Connie. She says, do you have any particular suggestions for nonprofits supporting an issue that has unfortunately become polarized in the current climate, having both supporters and detractors? She says, for us, that's immunizations.
Yeah, if I can jump in on that one. My first recommendation is always to be apolitical. Don't get involved in the politics of these issues. Because they tend to be temporary issues. They're not permanent issues. Sometimes they do become more permanent because of the fact that you'll find donors on both sides that want to do something and they want to contribute. We find this a lot in our work. We really try to stay out of it. Now, however, some of the leaders that we work with are not that way at all. They are very political and they want to be political and they have a large voice in that. So you have to kind of follow the lead of your organization. and your leadership in that organization and your board, whoever else is part of the managing team of the organization. But the recommendation from a fundraising perspective is stay apolitical. We don't want to make people upset needlessly, especially if they want to help. And so when we get together face to face, we find a lot of these things happen. And so what we tend to do is be good listeners and then provide that feedback back to our team that we work with. But we try not to get into a political argument for any reason whatsoever. I hope that helps, especially with healthcare issues too, because I understand the dilemmas that you face. And I'll give you another example of this. Kansas in particular is a very conservative state. So I know what you're dealing with in Kansas in this regard. That it's pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If you can't take care of it yourself, we're not going to help you. That whole approach. So all these organizations that are trying to help people sometimes feel like they're liberal, and they're not liberal at all. They just tend to be in this idea that every person ought to help themselves, and if you need help, you're weaker than other people. So we find this to be something we don't want to stay away from that argument altogether and just show the outcomes. Tell the real stories of what's happening to people. And it really motivates all kinds of people. You'll be so surprised. I find some of the hardest people I've ever met move to tears if they fully understand the outcomes that are being realized.
I would also add that that is the perfect example of bringing in that community well, two things. Bringing in what are the community's actual needs. You can get that information through a community needs assessment, a client survey. You can gather information in a number of ways to actually support what you are trying to accomplish through your work. So being able to, as Brad said, we work in an apolitical space. A lot of the causes that we support, who can argue with trying to help our neighbors get the resources and support that they need to thrive in whatever way it is that they need help. And so, thinking about how you can bring that community voice in is important to try to avoid some other polarizing topics. Also, keep in mind that you're not trying to win over everyone. You're looking for those donors and members of your community that are aligned to your mission, vision, and values. And sometimes that will not be everyone that you're trying to talk to, that you would like to talk to, that someone encourages you to reach out to. And that's okay. That is also helpful feedback to know that you don't need to be investing time in that relationship, but you're really trying to find who are those who are like-minded to the mission of your organization.
Thank you guys for that.
Brad,
did you have something else?
Yeah, the only thing is be prepared when you deal with misinformation, because we're dealing with that more than ever because of social media in particular. So that's something you do have to be prepared for, how to communicate in a way that is informative and truthful, as opposed to just a perspective that somebody might have. And so that's usually done with some stats. So I would encourage you to be prepared with that information, but talk about them in a way that is just to be understood, not in a way that's arguing for a certain point, if that makes sense. It's hard to tell statistics without doing some interpretation, but I would be prepared with that information if you could.
So the next question I had, one of your slides, I think recommended a desktop published case for support. And I thought that was it seemed like it would be a really good tip. I often think like, oh, if only, we had funding for X, Y, or Z to get something, really polished and professional, that was going to be like our golden ticket. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about what you mean by a desktop published case for support, maybe even like what specific, are you building things in Word documents, saving in PDF to print, or what specific programs are helpful and flexible for that? And if there are specific cases whenever you need to go with something more polished that a designer and professional printer or whatever, all the other graphic design centric things, when you need those more elevated pieces.
So a case for support, again, because it's meant to be your source of truth, it is just the narrative that you pull for all of the other documents. So it is really as simple as take the template that we've provided today and start filling it in that Word document. We want you to be able to update it at any point in time that you have relevant updates to incorporate into that narrative. And so it's not going to do you any good to have 1,000 of something sitting in your office that are out of date within 3 months of printing. The other thing that we find, especially in our major gift world, is that major donors, especially professional donors, who exist to give away money, do not want another piece of paper on their desk. They don't want it. And so that is one of the reasons that we emphasize a one-pager as much as we do, because we can create it in a desktop published manner. And so we create Word documents, and it is sometimes as simple as just putting a logo on it. Now you can do it in like Canva. You can also put a document in Canva if that's an easier platform for you to feel that you're polishing it up a little bit more. It just doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be something that goes to a professional printer. One of the handouts that we provided today in the resources is an actual designed case for support from the Pittsburgh Food Bank. Now, this is a document that is easy. It's not printed at all. We also didn't create it. It's a beautiful resource that is sort of out in our world quite a bit and is very visually compelling. Even though I'm calling it a designed case for support, it does not include the entire written narrative that is in their source of truth document. It's still boiled down to the most compelling pieces of information and visual supports that can help to inspire that donor. It can be shared digitally. It can be emailed quickly. It's very easy for a reader to kind of make their way through. It doesn't matter how beautiful your prose is. No one wants to read 12 pages of stats and rationales, and we have this program that does no one wants to read all of that. And so a designed case for support is often something that we're implementing maybe about halfway through our campaigns, because we know that our major donors don't want that. They have just like the Sunflower Foundation has an online application portal, and you know the format that you want to receive a grant proposal in. It doesn't matter how beautiful our designed case for support is. You are not the target audience for that. So a little bit of that is just lessons learned along the way, and something that you might intuitively know about your donors. So we like just a simple Word document that has all of the content dumped into it in an organized storytelling kind of way. And then that can inform everything else.
This might be a bit of a follow-up question from Elizabeth in the chat. She says, what is more important, a highly polished product or something authentic that is more humble? Do donors realize that if a nonprofit is totally focused on mission, they may not have the resources for polished products?
Yeah, my answer to that is authentic is always better. So it is sad to say, because of the tools that are available, More and more people are using AI to write things, using stock photography to tell stories, doing all those type of steps, and it looks better visually, but it's not accurate. And so I often have to think, because I do encounter this when I was raising money, especially for young people. I'd get a call from a donor and they'd say, I love that story about Mary and her family. I want to really help. And if I had to say back, that's not a real story, or that's not a real image, I would lose the relationship with that donor. I'd lose trust right away. So in all cases, you want to maintain that trust. And I do agree with you that they understand the limitations you might have as a nonprofit and not having some of these highly polished tools, because you're not spending like Procter and Gamble will spend on an ad, or that is not happening in our world. However, it gives us, we have enough tools now to make things really nice. Like our phones are taking remarkable photography nowadays. Our phones are taking remarkable video nowadays. So don't just settle for something that's not good. Look to do the best that you possibly can, as authentically as you can.
Very good. Well, if everyone could please join me in thanking Vickie and Brad for their time today. I will just quickly share one slide before we wrap up here. Just to remind you all that we'll be back reconvening this series on Tuesday, March 24th for a session titled Everything You Need to Know About Donor Advised Funds. I know DAFs are often a topic of high interest, so I'm really excited for this one. And then we'll reconvene in April for discovery conversations, corporate development, and prospect research for small shops. Again, the link to register for all of those webinars is on the Sunflower Foundation website. We will post the recording for today's session there, as well as send it to you, to those who registered, in a recap email with the resources and handouts that Vickie and Brad mentioned throughout their slides today. But with that, I think that's all we have for today. So thank you all for taking the time to join us, and we will see you next time on Tuesday, March 24th. Bye, everyone.